Let's finish off the warrior with the one and only protection. Now, this is a sort of a re-upload because my previous protection video was missing a couple of things that I brushed over, and some other things that were cut by mistake, and I wasn't happy with it, so I'm doing a round 2. So, what is there new on the protection warrior? Well, not much. Fundamentally, it still is pretty much the same spec. But there is a couple of interesting things going for Protection Warrior in Shadowlands. One of those is due to the unpruning, you're getting a lot more offensive type of abilities. You do feel a little bit more on the aggressive side. You have a lot more buttons to click to DPS. And that is fantastic because it's giving some vibes to some extent of the one and sometimes beloved gladiator stance. So starting off is Execute and Whirlwind. Now, Execute, it's simply fantastic, right? It's a great ability to finish off targets, it deals a lot of damage, so it's super satisfying to use. And yes, in dungeons, that's not always feasible, right? If you're going a little bit more defensive, if you're having trouble to keep yourself up, you're not really gonna spend your rage on this. The same thing goes for raids and whatnot. But when you can, when you have the ability to do such a thing, it's pretty fun to do, it's pretty fun to use, and in solo content like Torghast, like world content and stuff like that, it's a great ability to resort to, and the same thing goes for Whirlwind. Now, Whirlwind as a numbers issue, essentially, because currently it doesn't deal a lot of damage. It has a target cap of 5 targets, which is not very good when you take in consideration that Revenge hits all targets in a cone, in front of you. So Whirlwind feels a little bit behind, and it's more expensive than Revenge. But I don't want Blizzard to give up on Whirlwind, because just like Execute, Whirlwind is essentially providing more offensive abilities to Protection Warrior, and I think that's great. You don't necessarily have to use it all the time, but when you have some free rage to use it, when you have Thunderclap on cooldown and you don't have a proc of Revenge, it feels good to use a Whirlwind. Now currently, obviously, numbers kinda say for you to not use it because it's not worth, but it's still fun to press. So I hope they tweak this around so it's a little bit more worthwhile to press, because I think it's a super cool ability, a very iconic ability really to warriors, and I would like to see this to play offensively as protection. Other than that, you also have a Shattering Throw, which is again simply fantastic, just like the other specs. You can deal a lot of damage to shields and remove immunities. It does have a pretty big cooldown though. You also have one good but also a little bit of a bad change, which is Charge and Intervene. Now they are separate abilities again, which I do like. I didn't like that Charge and Intervene was merged into the same ability. The issue with this is that now for you to get to charges on Charge, you need to talent into double time, which is a little bit sucky, and I'm not gonna lie. You are kind of used to having to charges by now, and now having to lose a talent on this road to get to charges again doesn't feel all that good, but it is nice to have Intervene as its own ability. So it's a double-edged sword there, a little bit. You also get Hamstring. Now obviously this is also great for dungeons and stuff like that, to kite. It's a single target ability, but it's great to kite with. I can see some moments in previous expansions where this could have had a pretty nice use. You're also getting a Challenging Shout as an AoE taunt. You currently have this as an essence, so it's pretty great to stay with that as a core ability, which has been in the game for many years and was taken out for reasons. So yeah, that pretty much covers the baseline abilities that we are getting. Essentially, more abilities for you to press to just have more fun on your warrior. And I'm not gonna lie, Torghast, as a protection warrior, is actually really, really fun. Even though you are a tank, like I did as a Blood Decay and Vengeance, which was very fun in their own right, but as protection, I kind of felt like a DPS class even. And that's kind of nice, that you can have this sort of two playstyles that you can go at any given moment. You can either go more defensive and focus more on ignore pains and stuff like that, or you can just focus more on damage, and you have a lot of abilities to do such a thing. So I do like that. So let's move over to your talents. Now, talents also gotten a couple of changes, a lot of shuffling, right? A lot of talents switch places. This can mean some pretty good things, and you do have a couple of changes on current talents that do improve them rather. So for example, on our first tier here, we do get Punish, which is just an improvement to single target tanking for extra survivability. Now your debuff on the targets from the Shield Slam now overlaps, so it stacks up. The debuffs are on their own individual timers, but with procs and stuff like that, you can actually ramp this ability pretty high. So on single target, pure single target fights and stuff like that, on like raids, this can be pretty good. You do get War Machine now from the other two warrior specs, which is also fantastic for open world content, for Torghast, and even for dungeons, because you can generate more rage, and you're gonna get even more rage when you kill enemies, and it's gonna increase your movement speed, so it's extra mobility, which is fantastic. And you're also getting more rage, which can either mean more damage or, you know, more mitigation depending on what you're going for at any given moment, which is also great. Impending Victory is also now more interesting because you no longer have talents here to fight with it, because right now you have Punish, which is purely for a single target, right? It doesn't really work all that well when you're doing dungeons. You have War Machine, which is more focused towards dungeons, multi-target, stuff like that, where you get a lot of kills to get the proc off this talent. But if you don't want that extra rage, if you feel like you don't need to, you can just go for Impending Victory, and you're gonna get a lot more self-healing, which is great. I mean, it heals you for 30% of your maximum health, so it's pretty big, and you can freely take this now. You can freely take this and not feel handicapped by doing such, so that's pretty big positive. On the second tier, we have Double Time, which is, we already discussed. These other two we previously already had. Best Surf Cold basically just kind of deals more damage. It just has a flat damage increase, so it's a little bit more simple and also a little bit more powerful on procs. And this is the tier here that I actually cut in my previous video, which is really sad because Indomitable, yeah, it's now not only increasing your health, but is giving you a self-heal, which is fantastic, because one of the issues protection warriors always had is that they kind of lacked self-healing. I mean, you have buffs like Last Stand and Rallying Cry, and you have Victory Rush or Impending Victory, but you never have such a consistent self-healing ability, and this one is pretty great, because every 10 rage you spend, you're gonna heal by 1% of your maximum health. And this, currently, I mean, numbers may change, but it is quite substantial. I mean, each Ignore Pain that you're going to use, which costs 40 rage, is a 4% heal, right? Each Whirlwind, for example, if you use, is 3%. Revenge, if you don't use on proc, is 2%. So if you're playing defensively, it's just extra healing, which is fantastic. But actually, if you're going on the more offensive route, you do have a lot of healing, like in moments where, like execute moments, and you have the ability and you don't have the problem of going into execute, you're getting a lot of self-healing. And that, again, for solo content is also fantastic, but again, for any types of content, this is great. Now, you do have Bolster here. You do have Never Surrender. Never Surrender is just providing a stronger Ignore Pain, and Bolster is more of a stronger Last Stand if you going into a situation where you're gonna need extra cooldowns, a more powerful cooldown. But like for everyday scenario, Indomitable just seems to be the way to go, right? And getting that passive healing, essentially, that's what it is. It's great. It's really, really great. It fixes a lot of the issues, even though I do find a little bit weird that protection warriors can self-heal. And I mean, you're not a blood decay or anything like that, but it's a pretty nice, sustainable, consistent self-healing that you're now getting, which is pretty great. Then on this other tier, Into the Fray got a small nerf, and it changed tiers, of course. Now it's kind of fighting with these other sort of AoE tiers, Unstoppable Force for the Thunderclap goodness, and Booming Voice for extra rage and stuff like that. So pretty decent tier as well. And then on the last tier we have Ravager, which gotten a change which I don't really like. So Ravager, again, it's pretty nice to use, especially again if you're going offensively. It's an extra damaging ability. I mean, like, if you combine Ravager, if you go for Dragon's Roar, I mean, you do have a lot of AoE damaging abilities, then you have a lot of damage going on. Unstoppable Force too, so yeah, damage is kind of insane. But Ravager, the issue with Ravager right now is that it no longer stays in place and it follows targets, and that's to fix primarily the Arms Warrior issue of sometimes targets mobs moving away from your Ravager. I get that, but as a protection, you don't really need this, because a lot of the times when you use Ravager, outside of just wanting to deal more damage, is to use it on ads, to use it on ads that are about to spawn and stuff like that. And this ability will prevent that, because if you use this just as the ads are about to spawn, the Ravager might start moving around and kind of ruin your strategy there. So I don't really like this, and it's not really necessary for protection. I mean, I get on Arms, it has its issues, and we talked about that on my Arms video, but I would prefer Ravager to go back to the old BF current version of Ravager. And I would also like to see the parry component back into Ravager to make it a little bit more of a protection ability, to feel it more like it's a tank ability, not just a DPS ability. I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, getting extra damaging abilities for protection is great, but I would like to see like the parry chance. I think was a 35% parry chance that we once had on Ravagers, so I would like to see that back. So yeah, that pretty much covers our talents. I think the big thing here is obviously Indomitable for the healing, and that is great. So with that said, let's move over to Covenant abilities. Now, for the most part, you have some pretty cool things. So for example, the Curing ability, the Spear of Bastion, it's an extra AoE damaging ability. Yes, like you don't have enough of those. It deals a lot of damage, it feathers enemies, so it kind of grips them in place, so it's also giving you some extra control. Not a whole lot, because the radius of it is kind of small, but hey, still some extra control. It's also giving you rage, so throughout, pretty awesome ability to use. I mean, it's super fucking fun to use, not gonna lie. The spear looks awesome. We got the Night Fae ability, which is Ancient Aftershock. It's a little bit weird right now, because it's essentially a shockwave, a more colorful, more prettier shockwave. It does exactly the same thing. It stuns enemies and it deals a lot of damage, and it also provides you a small dot, giving you rage. It's great. I mean, it's good. I kind of prefer having Spear of Bastion and Shockwave than just having two abilities that essentially do the same thing. But hey, and I can see them merging these abilities in the future, because right now it's a little bit weird and a little bit too OP for you to have two stuns on demand. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You have a lot of AoE damage and you have these two AoE stuns abilities. Yeah, it's a little bit insane. They definitely should merge these two. Then we have the Venthyr Covenant ability, which is Condemn. Now, Condemn is primarily targeted at, again, you going offensively. It's improving your execute. In fact, it's replacing it altogether, enabling you to use it above 80% of health, which is pretty big. And you also get a small debuff on the target that will essentially make you prevent damage. You're going to prevent some damage, you can absorb some damage, and it can be quite substantial if you actually do a lot of condemns, but the issue with that is that's not always feasible, right? If you're playing a little bit defensively, or if the enemy hits you really hard, you're not really going to spend your rage on executes, right? But again, if you're going full-on offensive, and if you're going for full-on damage, if you're going for that gladiator quote-unquote stance type of play, Condemn is fantastic. I mean, I love this ability. It looks great, it feels great, it's super powerful, and again, with Indomitable, you're gonna get a lot of self-healing out of this ability, both in execute windows and at the start of fights, which is pretty big. Then we have Conqueror's Banner, which has a lot of issues. It's a cool ability. I do like the idea of it. Essentially, you're going to get this banner. You're going to be able to stack these stacks called the Glory, either by shield slams or by killing targets. And once you have 15 stacks, you get the maximum amount of the buff, which is this banner that you place, and you're gonna get a buff to health, 20% of health increase, and extra attack speed. Now the buffs are pretty decent, especially for a tank. You know, extra health is always a bonus, and extra attack speed means more damage. The issue with this is obviously that, well, for one, outside of dungeons and where you gonna get a lot of kills, the buff takes a very long time to stack up, but it actually lasts for quite a while. Like when you have the full stacks, you have about 2 minutes, I believe, where you can decide when to use the banner. So if you can use this ability defensively in a way, like for the increase of health, kind of like an extra rallying cry. And on that side of things, it's actually pretty nice. I think the issue really with this ability is two, which are kind of the opposite of each other. One is, since it's a buff-based ability that you're also buffing other allies, you know, 4 allies and yourself, there's potential of pressure being placed on some warriors to take this ability just to buff other people. I don't like that. And the other thing is that currently, obviously this is alpha, you don't really have a sated, right? You don't really have things to prevent you from stacking banners. So when banner ends, you use another one from some other warrior, and you're pretty much gonna have this buff up all the time. So that's definitely an issue as well. But in general, like when you compare it with the other abilities, it feels a little bit boring. I mean, you're getting Condemned, you're getting Spear of Passion and Ancient Aftershock, and this one you're just getting a banner. Now, it does have its use, and it has potential to be pretty cool. And as for a tank, it's actually even more useful than Arms or Fury due to the health increase. It's just not that as exciting as the other ones, and there's a lot of tuning to be done there as well. But again, that pretty much covers the Protection Warrior, second time. And I mean, I'm enjoying it. I do like it. I feel like it's an improvement. It's a little bit more of a spicier version of the current Protection Warrior. You're getting a lot of damage, right? You're getting a lot of damaging abilities. You have the ability to go full on offensive and deal quite a lot of damage. I mean, already you do quite a lot of damage, but now you feel like you're even doing more. You have more ability to suppress, which is great. The self-healing from Indomitable is great. And the talent shufflings are all around. I do like the placements of it. I do like the current placements that we have now, and the small little changes that we've gotten. I think they feel pretty great. Yeah. So yeah, that covers it. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.